Shalom, shalom, shalom to the 12 tribes of Israel that have been scattered to the four corners of the earth. Shalom. I'm Mori Yoshiyahu Dawid of the Ark, and we are in a discussion and a study on the covenants. And this study is on the new covenant is in the old covenant. That's the subject. The new covenant is in the old covenant. And so we left off talking about how our covenants are blood covenants, and every single covenant that was made with Israel was made in blood. And you had one party on one side, you had another party on the other side, and you have, a mediator in the middle. That's the whole idea of in the middle. And I gave you all in the last video a definition of a mediator. Just simple English definition: a person who attempts to make people involved in a conflict come to an agreement or a go-between. So you have a person who's either a go-between or a person who's trying to make persons involved in a conflict come to an agreement. And so how does that apply to each of our covenants? Well, each of our covenants was in blood, and that was in the last video. Each of the animals used were animals that were valuable to the people for either livestock, food, work, or whatever, very valuable, and of course, innocent. And so these animals were supposed to make a person understand something about the mediator has to die. And that is a theme that starts in Genesis. And so we see the lamb slain in the book of Genesis. And of course, I've done that in the last video. So I just want to go forward now to show you that Isaiah showed us, according to the Bible, that we would need a mediator as a nation. And that's when we studied Isaiah chapter 1. And we see the need in chapter 18 when he says, "Come now, let us reason together." Why? Because on the one hand, Israel, you are in a covenant and you're breaking the covenant, and you're wicked and you don't know who you are and whose you are, and you're not turning, even though you have been stricken to the point where not only did he give you this picture that the nation is sick, the heart is faint, and all of that, we also have the picture that everything has been taken. And I was going to say this in the last video, and it slipped my mind, so I'm going to say it in this video, that when it says, "Why should you be stricken anymore? You will only rebel more and more," or revolt more and more in verse 5. Of course, this is looking into our day. We are Israel that have been scattered, and those of us who are the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, we know that the last punishment for the nation of Israel would be slavery away from our land, and it would be a slavery where no one would redeem us. And both things happened, just like the Bible says. We were taken away from our land. We lost our last name. We lost our inheritance. We lost our language. I can go on. And then we were beaten and robbed and spoiled and used and abused. And it still goes on in the world and in Americas, all over, and wherever the transatlantic slave trade took our people, you will see that this was part of the ultimate punishment that we received from our Abaya for breaking the covenant. Now, we'll get to that later, but I just want you to see something here. Where we are now in time is the last covenant, what they call the new covenant, but it's the final covenant. It is the renewed covenant. That's where we are. And this verse is so interesting because he says there's going to come a time where you won't be stricken anymore. Why? It's not going to do any good. So slavery was the last national punishment that would happen to our people to get us to turn back to Yah. And if after that we didn't turn to him, he would say he's going to destroy us, which means the very next move, really for the whole world, but that's not this video. But the very next move is the judgment of Yah. That's what's coming next, for sure. And it will be judged in the house of Israel. We already know only a very small remnant is going to be saved, which means that probably 90-something%, maybe 99% will be destroyed because they will not turn no matter what people say. But there will be a remnant, very small remnant according to verse 9. And like I said, there are no more captivities for us to go through. There won't be any more of that. The next step, of course, is death. So he says, why would you die? The idea is, won't you just come and let's reason together? Let's talk. I have a plan. And of course, the plan would be to send a mediator. This mediator is going to be a mediator. Watch, just like instead of using the animals, this new mediator that will ratify this new covenant that he promises to make will be not in the blood of the goats, sheep, turtle doves, red heifers. No, this new covenant will be in the very blood of Yah. And that's why that's when it starts to get deep. That eventually some person is going to shed his blood as the mediator for the covenant between Yah and man. That the ultimate mediator will not be rams, lambs, turtle doves, red heifers, and all that. No, the ultimate mediator, which is about the covenant. Of course, he's not coming to do away with the covenant. That doesn't make any sense. He's the mediator. Why would he be coming to do that? He's coming to ratify it, but he's not going to use animals. He's going to shed his own blood. So let's see if that new covenant is prophesied in the old covenant. All right, let's see whether or not this mediator is prophesied. And again, there are so many chapters between chapter 1 and chapter 53. I just do yourself a favor and read it with this in mind. Read it with the idea that one day Yah's going to stop using these animals, and one day he is going to reveal his arm of salvation to the world. He is going to redeem Israel. And we know that in Hamashiach, who is the visible image of the invisible Yah. I'll get to that in a moment, but just keep that in your mind. That he's going to move because of the sins of Israel. We're going to be moved off of the animal sacrificial system that mediates the covenant to a one-time offering and sacrifice, slain, if you please, of a mediator. And once that is done, then anyone who breaks the covenant from that point forward, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sin. So we find out that's so important that in these last days, we turn back to Yah's covenant. Now let's prove these things. Isaiah chapter 52, verse 13. Isaiah 52, 13, and we're going to then read into 53. As I mentioned before, in several videos, the King James Version Bible divisions are not divinely inspired. The English translators were just, many of them just stopped whenever they wanted to and just put a chapter in a verse. I ain't mad at them all the way, but this is one of the times where it just definitely does not start in 53. It starts at least it starts in 52:13. Behold, my servant shall deal prudently. He shall be exalted and extolled and be very high. So we know up to this point, Yah has a servant that's coming. Okay, we already know he's going to be very wise. That's what that word means, prudent. Of course, we know Hamashiach. He will be exalted, Hamashiach. He will be extolled and be very high. It's all Hamashiach. Hamashiach Yehoshua. As many were astonished or astoned, I can say that, at thee, his vestige was so marred more than any man. So we know